U.S. stocks have definitely plunged after the UK voted to leave the EU. In fact, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged more than 500 points. Also, the Nasdaq dropped more than 176 points, while the S&P 500 slid more than 54.94 points after U.S. markets opened for trading.
Yeah, I think the Dow ended up down more than 600. Every market measurable was between like 3.3 and 4.1%, and 4.1% of a drop.
Right. And so what leads to this is the uncertainty, right? It makes investors very uncomfortable. They don't know what the future holds. The fact that the UK voted to leave the EU leads to that uncertainty. And also, it's a 2-year process for them to officially separate from the EU. So we have no idea how this is going to play out and how it's going to impact the markets long term. But we do know that at the moment, it's having a negative impact on U.S. stocks and also stocks throughout the world, not just U.S. stocks.
I know what I'm about to say because somebody who I follow retweeted someone who I don't know, so I'm sure it's true. But like, yeah, it takes 2 years. October, I think, of 2018, right? And apparently, and we'll read a lot of stories about this in the coming days, so forgive me what I say here that's wrong. But Parliament is not bound by this vote, and like, so there could be a moment where some minds are changed, especially if the economic situation is so grim that you might have political cover like, okay, yeah, I got it. We just didn't realize how bad this would be. But I don't know. That struck me as I read that, and then throughout the day, every news report reacted like this is as done can be, even though it will take 2 years. But it strikes me that over 2 years, if it looks like a dreadful decision, I mean, they won't just, are they obligated? Have we obligated by this referendum today for Great Britain to walk into a disaster? If it appears that in 2 years it would be a disaster.
You know, if this is partly a result, which I think it is greatly a result of the regular people in the UK feeling disempowered, if they do that, that will make them feel even more so.
Maybe, but unless we'd reached a point where there was like the polls were massively like,
yes,
no.
Right, well, I see what you're saying, but you know, they have to stop reacting to democracy like it's a problem instead of like it's a solution.
But you know what? I think what Ben's saying actually makes a lot of sense because, again, I don't think a lot of people who voted to leave really understood what they were doing, right? I think that they're frustrated by their economic situation and they think leaving is going to somehow improve it, but it's not going to improve it. I mean, by the way, not to change the subject, it's related, but it's a little bit of a tangent. Okay, so because of what happened in the UK, something that we in the United States have absolutely no control over, the retirement accounts of Americans are losing money, right? And so it doesn't matter if it's a 401k or an IRA, you have lost money as a result of this. We cannot privatize Social Security, okay? I mean, come on, think about it. Like, if you tie your entire retirement savings on risk, it's a nightmare. It's a disaster. Again, you have no control over what's happening in the UK. You have no control over how they vote. And you're going to lose money as a result of this uncertainty. And it drives me insane. So
no, it's a totally related point. I mean, it shows you the absolute danger of making something as basic a safety net as Social Security as tying that to risk management.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great
Risky
point.
wealth management.
Because people really, again, this is a historic vote. I mean, they say it over and over again. There's a reason. Right. I mean, you know, they started the EU back, I mean, the concept was in the 50s or after World War II. I mean, these countries, we forget because we're out of that, you know, that era. But I mean, France was fighting, you know, attacking Germany, attacking England for 100 years. Like, that's all they did is fight each other and destroy each other.
Kill young men after generation after generation after generation.
Just think about the great geniuses, whether it's musicians or sculptors, that died in World War I. Just think of the great geniuses, mathematicians, died in World War II. I mean, millions and millions of young, it's the young that get killed.
Right.
Right? So,
the War of the Roses.
Hey. Right. So, I mean...
so do you think that this will have an effect in a sense? I don't think it will. But if we had smart leaders who are up on things in the United States, they would take a cue and like, oh, maybe we should try to implement a government that's more responsive to the voters instead of the donors. Maybe with maybe we'll have a same kind of problem here because we have the biggest income disparity since the Gilded Age. You know, the elites are mismanaging the world right now. and they mismanaged Europe, and this is the fucking result of it. And then and then when they super mismanagement, who has to pay the price? Regular people pay the price, you know? Look what they did to Greece, right? So this is them revolting against that kind of elitism, the banks running everything. And it's happening right now in America, too. You have half the Democratic Party revolting against it. You have the entire Republican Party right now are just about revolting against it because they've gotten behind this madman Donald Trump, right? So we have a big problem. And again, the elites in both countries are going to ignore it. And they're going to talk about everything else except what the problem is. And the problem is that the governments are fucking bought, especially here in the United States, completely unresponsive to the voters.
Right. The elites are always going to do what the elites are going to do, right? But what's more important is that you have, you know, a general public that's empowered with knowledge so they understand why they're in the situation that they're in. And if they don't have that knowledge, which they could get from, you know, good media that does a good job reporting the actual facts, well, then they'll vote the right way and they'll hold these politicians and the elite accountable so they get what they actually want. Unfortunately, I feel like this vote was misguided. I think that a lot of people were ignorant to what the issues were, and I know I'm probably going to get some heat for saying that it's ignorant, but it is. If you're frustrated by your economic situation, this is not going to solve it. Brexit did not solve it. Leaving the EU is not going to solve it. It's going to make the problem worse.
Just like what was the most Googled phrase in Europe, you know, in England was, "What's the EU?" I mean, in Britain, so all these people that are voting to leave, they don't even really understand what the EU is, but they're angry.
They're angry. They think the EU is making the guy named Mohammed move in next door with his family.
Yes.
So but you know, Anna, you're right. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
We're getting dumber. Many people are getting smarter, but overall, I mean, you know, at least when our parents were growing up, the news was, they only had a couple sources for news, and that was a problem, no question, but they weren't corporately owned. And now, you know, the great thing on the first episode of The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt was characters walking around wondering why they knew so much about the Kardashians. We don't even watch the show, was the point, but like, oh, we get it anyway.
Right.
Like, you can't get away from it. So and then to Jimmy's point is, we're never, you know, as Barney Frank said, everybody's, I'm paraphrasing, you know, everybody hates the politicians. Well, the voting public is not so great either. He said something far more clever than that, you know. Sure. And I always think it's a great point. It's like they're no prize either, is what he said. Like, it's everybody's an idiot. So it becomes more incumbent when you have and much of it is a culture of people who have to feed their families and take care of their kids and worry about their careers, that they can't follow what's happening in the world, or they've certainly made that decision. And so it becomes incredibly it's one why it's so easy to be corrupt, because nobody's calling you on the corruption, because nobody's really watching. The voters aren't really watching, not enough of them. So it becomes incredibly important that the people we elect stand up for those people who aren't paying attention.
Yes.
And condescending as it may sound, they're not paying attention. So look what happens when you have half of one party and all of another party that stops being responsive to regular people. And the result is then,
they become vulnerable. Those people then become vulnerable to demagogues like Donald Trump.
Totally.
And to the Leave campaign. Those people become vulnerable. You know when they become vulnerable? When their government and their economy leaves them behind and all the money, all the wealth goes to the upper 5%. That's when they become vulnerable. So these people wouldn't be looking to Trump. If they had a job and they had a government that they would go, this guy's a fucking crazy racist. It's like, yeah, I might have problems with whoever, but I'm not a racist like that guy, and I have a job, and my kids can go to school, and I'm not, and we have a future, we have hope. They don't have that anymore. And who do they do? So then they start pointing fingers. It's Mexicans. In England, they go, it's Muslims. Interesting thing in England, the Muslims voted to stay. Isn't that interesting? I mean, they voted to leave, but the people in the cities voted to stay.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the people who were least affected by immigration voted to leave.
Right.
Yeah,
So that
the
goes
rural areas of the UK were overwhelmingly voting in favor of leaving, which I thought was really fascinating.
You know, when you look at the breakdown of the age groups, because you'll find here the Republican voters, especially the older people get, you know, the less diverse they're interested in.
Right.
And if you look at that breakdown in England, it mirrors us exactly. Over 60, it's like, you know, get these people away from me. This is my country. You know, I don't want to go to a 7-Eleven. You know what I mean? It's amazing how we're very similar in that aspect.
Yeah, there are definitely similarities. And, when it comes to the whole thing about preserving culture, you see the same thing in the United States where you have older generations reminiscing about the better time in the United States, maybe before the civil rights movement. But, I think younger generations are more likely to embrace diversity. They're more likely to be open to accepting different cultures.
Fact. We've seen that, no question.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are definitely parallels there that are interesting. And it's sad. It's sad what we're seeing right now, not only in the United States, but in UK.
Sorry, Anna. By any chance, do we have that Neil Farage, the guy who sort of led his quote on the British Today show today?
No.
Okay, so no. So I just wanted to know if I didn't want to step on it. So Nigel Farage, who was the leader of he's the head of the Independence Party, it said that Boris Johnson was the leader in Parliament of the. Right. This guy was the figurehead of the movement, and maybe he's in Parliament too. But he is, and he celebrated it today. But part of the campaign was that I don't know what it is. I don't know the number. 1.35 billion pounds a day or a million pounds a day that they give to the EU. And the point was, one of their big campaign moves was that would go to the NHS, the National Health Service, right? And then, of course, no, it won't.
No, it won't.
Right. And today he goes. This morning he was. It's a clip worth running on Monday, because it was a great moment of journalism. He was like, "Yeah, that was a mistake. I didn't support running that." And she's like, "What do you mean it was a mistake?"
Right.
She goes, "I don't know how many people made their vote because that money was going to go to the NHS, but it wasn't none, and it might have been 2 million. It might have pushed it over the edge, and now you're saying that won't happen." And he was like, "Well, anyway, the important thing is," and I wasn't supportive of that. She's like, "You're the head of the movement." Yeah. She's like, "You didn't denounce it then," and of course it's not going to go there. And so it's a great piece of journalism, and it's a great moment of how, deceptive ad campaigns, which always...
What kind of liars they are, basically.
Well,
it's an example of what liars these people will do. Because he obviously was making money out of this, right? He wouldn't be so pro let's leave if he wasn't getting his fair share.
So this is their version of WMDs. It's like, oh, we got there. Turns out there aren't any.
Excuse me.
Hey, we're leaving the EU. Turns out none of that money's going to the NHS. We're mistake. Whoopsie.
Yeah, that's
well, they could have been there. They could have been there.
Yeah. Well, we thought they were. We thought we would, but it was a mistake. It was just a mistake. And so now everybody has to live with it.